The Freedom Socialist Party and Workers' Voice recognizes that both the Democrats and Republicans are the party of billionaires, right? No news there. We say that working people need our own party that would focus on the interests of our class and be accountable to us. We believe that the nature of a labor party needs to be anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and fights for women, people of color, immigrants, the LGBTQI plus community, seniors, and disabled folks. This new labor party would be different from the capitalist labor parties that exist in Europe and elsewhere because they would be in opposition to the corporations and bosses. So today's discussion will go into more specifics of what a labor should be, what it can accomplish, and what is needed to build one. It will cover the questions and insights of our coworkers, activists, and our own experiences. It's an opportunity to connect the struggles that are currently being waged under one banner, and that represents the working class. So again, welcome everybody, and thank you again for coming. So we're just gonna dive right into our panel. So let me go ahead first by introducing who we have. Elias Holtz is a member of the Freedom Socialist Party National Committee, is a television writer, director, producer who joined the Writers Guild of America East and helped lead a unionization effort at their TV production company to form BSTV Workers United.
All right.
Yeah, we can pause and talk for that. Elias is currently engaged in a fight with the union, with his union siblings against his unfair firing and for their first contract. Their local is historic because it includes production assistants and culinary workers who are normally excluded from entertainment industry unions and infusing their fight with demands of the lowest paid and most ignored skilled workers. We also have on the panel Sultana Hussein. She's the recording secretary of Amazon Labor Union, IBT Local 1. In 2022, the ALU made history by winning the first and only NLRB certified union at an Amazon warehouse in the United States. Sultana is dedicated to organizing Amazon, viewing it as a crucial task in the labor movement's fight for working class liberation, and is committed to the mission and a vision of rank and file class struggle unionism. She also serves as a co-facilitator for New York City Labor for Palestine and is with the New York City Mobilization for Reproductive Justice. Welcome. Rounding out our esteemed panel is Hutch, who is a factory worker in Bridgeport, Connecticut, a member of the Teamsters Union, and a member of Workers' Voice. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, he helped organize worker-to-worker aid and solidarity with union members in, if you can tell me and pronounce the Ukraine, who are impacted by the war and government attacks on workers' rights. He is currently working with union members across Connecticut to help found Connecticut Labor for Palestine. And in 2010, Hutchison ran for U.S. Congress and was the first revolutionary socialist on the ballot in Connecticut in 60 years. So welcome. Wow. So let's just dive right into our conversation about a labor party. So first question, what do you think a labor party would look like? So Hutch, go ahead, take a stab at that.
All right, great, thank you. Great to see everybody here. It's an awesome looking crowd. Really happy to be out here in Harlem today with everybody. When I think of a labor party, thank you. When I think of a labor party, I first think of a rebuilt fighting labor movement where the unions have been politicized. They're mobilizing their members for not just the economic struggles on the jobs day to day, but also for the larger political struggles around access to healthcare, abortion rights, around the struggle for immigrant rights, for solidarity for freedom of Palestine, and actually mobilizing their members for those things as well. So that's the first thing I think. I don't think that we can build a labor party rooted in just a handful of workers, in their workplaces, just shouting for a Labor Party. It's going to be this big social transformation that happens, in the course of struggle and in the course of big strikes, and not strikes that are managed from the top down, but strikes that are led by the rank and file and are democratic and militant in their nature. And when I think about that, I think about what would it have meant, if we had 14 million workers, the labor movement as it currently is, organized into a labor party. What would have it meant for the railroad worker strike that was, that had a contract forced on them by the Biden and Harris administration that was supported in a bipartisan way? What would it have meant for the UAW strike that made gains, but if there had been an active labor party organizing workers across the country to support that strike, maybe they could have taken out, instead of selective shops, they could have gone out on strike in every single shop controlled by the big three and won a decisive victory, reopened the closed plants, and began to think about the transformation of the auto industry into more green, sustainable economy. What would it have meant for the Teamster negotiations against UPS, where they did all these great practice pickets, they looked strong, they looked big, and they looked ready to fight, and then in the end conceded to lower wages, hourly wages for new employees. They still haven't gotten the air conditioning in the trucks they need. There's workers still dying from heat exhaustion. What would it have meant during that strike if we had a labor party with millions of workers mobilized to take on the bosses, to build the largest picket lines so that no trucks could move, and they could actually win those decisive demands and have them implemented immediately? And I think when you extend that, when you think about all of that and the great social transformation that could happen in that situation, you think about all that could be possible in transforming the entire society from top to bottom, so that the people who are in production, who are doing the producing, who are taking care of our families in the service sector, who are on the margins of society, we could flip that around, and working people and the oppressed could then be in control and lead this society and transform it completely. And so when I think of the Labor Party, I imagine that whole process, the struggle for the real liberation of the working class and oppressed. And that takes, there's no question about it, that takes class independence. And that is one of the key questions for the socialist movements today, for the working class movement today, is the question of class independence, is breaking from the Democratic and the Republican parties, and also from not running as mixed class third party candidates, like on the Green Party ticket or Peace and Freedom Party, all these sort of formations that are mixed class, that have small business owners, that have landlords and this sort of thing that are in the party. When I think of that party, I don't think of a party that has these capitalist elements in it, because when we think about it, like in our union meetings, I know my comrade Dan over here mentions this a lot, and it's a great point. In our union meetings, we don't let the bosses into our meetings. We don't let them participate in our discussions in our unions. And so why would we do that in the political realm? Why would we allow the bosses to participate and have a say in our discussions and our actions in the political realm? And so I think when I imagine all of this, this is what I imagine when I think of a Labor Party and what's possible. And I think we're going to get into a lot more different aspects of this today. And hopefully we have some good questions and comments from the audience. So I look forward to hearing what y'all have to say as well. Thanks.
Okay, I'm following up. That was really good, Hutch. Thank you everyone for being here. It's really an honor to be speaking out in this panel. When I think about a Labor Party, I really think about us, right? Every single person who is in this room right now, working class people who, we are organizing our communities, we are organizing around different struggles every single day, but we don't actually have a political vehicle to push the things that we need as working class people. And how do we build something like that? We organize, we keep organizing, but we organize together. And we build that united front that is able to confront the two-party system, which is, you know, two sides of the same capitalist coin, you know, serves billionaire interests and corporate interests and doesn't actually serve us, right, the people. So that's what I really envision in what this Labor Party could look like. It's built by us, grassroots, from the bottom up, and it's for us, it represents us, it gives us a real voice to create effective change in the society, the things that we fight for all the time. You know, we're organizing to make happen in so many different movements, but in the end of the day, those at the top aren't listening. We can hit the streets and we can keep hitting the streets till the end of time, and until we have actually built like a mass organization to exercise our collective power, and that's when we can do that through a Labor Party. It's difficult to affect real change. So that's what I imagine a Labor Party serving, you know, our interests, our needs, built by us, for us.
I agree. All right. Yeah, right on. I think for me, a Labor Party, I mean, I co-sign all that. It's really harnessing the power of the working class and the power of unions, which we've seen, right? We've seen the power of unions over the last couple of years to advocate for their members and win demands. I think there's a stark contrast to the ability to win in a strike struggle as compared to trying to pass legislation to the Democratic Party or, you know, other avenues we've all tried, we've, you know, struggled with. You know, the port workers won, they should have stayed out longer and they could have won more. So we'll start there. But what they did win, I think, is like pretty impressive so far. You know, $24 increase in wages, and they were out for like less than a week, right? So it's just a small example of how much power we have as a working class, and we're not harnessing it in, like you two said, a vehicle for our own voice, for our own needs. Right now, what happens is so much of union money and energy gets funneled into the Democratic Party. And let's be real, they would not get reelected without unions. They just wouldn't. They don't have ground game. All these organizations can't get the volunteers out there like unions do. And they've abused unions so much. You know, it's a toxic, abusive relationship, right? So what if we used all that ground game, that organization, that money, hundreds of millions of dollars for our own party? But I think it's more than unions. It's the whole working class. I think the party, Labor Party, would incorporate all working people, also the unemployed. I'm unemployed right now. You know, I want to be a part of it, obviously. But people that are cast aside, who are really oppressed, like disabled people, have to be a part of a Labor Party. Certainly, immigrant labor we've seen how much the Democrats have betrayed immigrants and even joined the right-wing scapegoating, which is disgusting. A Labor Party with the leadership of immigrant workers would be so powerful, you know, because that's a sleeping giant of labor in this country. So I think our vision in Freedom Socialist Party is a Labor Party that really takes all this leadership, which the Democratic Party either ignores or it, you know, sucks up for their elections and then spits back out when they win or lose, and really builds an incredible organization with the leadership that the working class has, with all the most oppressed movements that are out there fighting. For us, it has to have an anti-capitalist platform. It's really important. And when I say that, I mean, a platform not just of reforms, of good ideas, but that really talks about the power structure in this country, how the richest billionaires have so much power, political power, and the working class just gets shafted every time. So it's not just about allocating, a higher minimum wage or universal healthcare, huge things, but who has the power over our basic resources? Where our money goes to the military industrial complex to bomb children in Gaza. We're not doing anything about climate change, and folks are really suffering in the South right now. And a Labor Party also is about not just this country, but having a voice to have solidarity with workers in other countries too, in Palestine, in Ukraine, across our southern border. Because we have more in common and working people with each other than we do with our right-wing governments and the bosses, right? So we should align. So I think our vision of a Labor Party and Freedom Socialist Party, my vision of one, is really it's powerful. It takes the best elements of working class people and it gives them a chance to fight for what we need.
So in the 90s, there was attempts, in previous times as well, but most recently in the 90s, an attempt nationally to form a Labor Party, right? And so it didn't work, partially because, as we know, they decided they didn't want to run candidates, which seems a little silly, but hey, so be it. They had their political reasons. So why now? Why now are we saying we need to have a Labor Party? What is different? Why do we need to do that? So let's see. Sultana.
So the right time is now because one, fascism in this country continues to grow, right? And we're run by right-wing, reactionary, political systems that are just entrenched. The time now is we're at a moment where labor is organized in a way that has never been or hasn't been in decades, really. So it's the perfect time to really encapsulate that energy where we are building together, we are building the structure that we need from the bottom up. We're having these conversations, we're educating each other about what it means to be organized as the working class. And I think the conversation about building a Labor Party, it might not happen right now at this exact moment, but we have to put in the structure required to actually build this kind of mass organization of working class people. And that's going to take millions and millions of one-on-one conversations and real organizing, and that takes time. So that we have to start now. It has been going on, but this idea of a Labor Party, we have to keep it in our minds that this is what we are working towards. We're working towards something that can actually create that real change that we need.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to touch on some of the things that Elias mentioned and Sultana mentioned. But first, I just want to start by saying, why do we talk about a demand for a Labor Party? Why not? Why are we saying build a revolutionary party? Well, we are. We want to build revolutionary parties. We want to build Workers' Voice and Freedom Socialist Party, and we want to come together and have these common experiences and kind of grow together. But when we're talking about the wider working class, the level of class consciousness is really not developed yet to be able to say like just come and join. Like if I went into my factory and I said, join a revolutionary socialist party, if people would look at me like I had three heads. It's not that they're opposed to the idea of socialism or the ideals that we might stand for, but the concept just isn't there. And the idea of breaking with the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, that seems like a huge step. But if you talk about a Labor Party, it's kind of opening up the idea to this idea of class independence. It's opening up the idea that there's alternatives out there that we can fight for. So we don't make a fetish out of the demand for a Labor Party. We say, yes, we want to build a Labor Party, but if in the meantime, a Revolutionary Socialist Party that's a mass party springs up tomorrow, we might build that, we would want to build that as well and be a part of that. And I think if there was a Labor Party, we would fight for the program of that party because there's going to be reformist elements in there. There's going to be reactionary elements in there. There's going to be revolutionary elements in there. And we would go into that party and there would be a struggle for ideas. And that's really what it is. It's an arena. It's a basis where we can struggle for those ideas. We cannot do that in the Democratic Party. We cannot have that. We don't have that access in the Democratic Party because we're shut out. They use us. Today, IUPAT and AFSCME and Alleghenies in Pennsylvania are out walking around with hundreds of workers campaigning for Democrats, and they're doing that in every city across the country. They'll have us do that, but we never have a say or a seat at the table, and we're never going to have a seat at their table because it's for the capitalists and by the capitalists. And so we need our own party. We need our own vehicle, and that's what a Labor Party would represent. And if we had a Labor Party, imagine Unite Here is going to be knocking on hundreds of thousands, if not millions of doors across the country in the elections this year. Imagine if all that energy, time, and money were spent on building something for our class, for us, for things that we need. A Labor Party campaign wouldn't just be about getting people elected. It would be about using that platform to uplift all of the social struggles, all of the fights for workers' rights, everywhere across the country and internationally. It would not be a national movement, it would be an international movement where we would fight for solidarity with the people of Gaza and Palestine, where we'd fight for solidarity with the working class in Ukraine, fighting not just the Russian invasion, but also their own capitalist class who's trying to screw them over in the course of this war. And that's what a Labor Party would be. And now is the time to do that. But it takes time to organize it. And it means every one of us in here going back into our workplaces, into our communities, and having discussions, starting Labor Party clubs in your unions, and building that consciousness up, in your unions. And this will help, revive the labor movement at the same time, build a political vehicle for us to advance our causes.
Great, thank you. All right, go ahead, Elias.
Yeah. Well, I think my answer to the question of why now is we cannot afford to be where we are in 4 years, right? Because we know actually we won't be where we are. We'll be with a bigger right wing. We'll be with more flooding, more climate change, more crisis, more attacks from the bosses. And I'm sure a lot of people in this room agree, but I am losing my mind at how much the Democrats enable the far right. They let them get up there and say whatever they want, and they move to the right on immigration. They did not answer these horrible scapegoating around Haitian immigrants. Let's not say migrants, they're immigrants, with their horrible scapegoating and demonization. Did they have rallies defending immigrants when that happened? No, they should have, right? But they let it happen. They enable the far right. And they do this by saying everything's fine. Capitalism is fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to have an opportunity economy. You'll get your little crumbs and everything's fine. The bosses who are screwing you, they're also innovators. Also, don't worry about the genocide in Gaza. Don't worry about all those babies covered in ash. Who cares? It's fine. We'll figure it out. And so we know throughout history, during times of crisis, if working class doesn't have a left alternative that actually speaks to the reality that they are dealing with, aka capitalist crisis, then a lot of them will go to the right, and they will go to these right-wing ideas because the right wing can say whatever they want. They can trash the system, and millionaires even, they can be eclectic, and they're able to lie and win people over. So if we don't have a Labor Party with an alternative that's clear to working people to speak truth to what they're experiencing, the pain that people have felt since the pandemic, the lack of jobs, the lack of security, with an answer of like, there's a reason why you don't have a job, the reason why you're getting screwed. It's not Mexicans across the border. It is not China. It is probably Elon Musk. He's the enemy. It is these capitalists who are screwing us over, who are monopolizing. And so that's, I think, in the negative, to answer this question in the negative, that the Democrats are, enabling the far right. But I think there's a ton of reasons why we can answer it's time in the positive. All right, pop quiz. Who wants to guess at the percentage of approval that unions have right now? How many Americans approve of unions, percentage-wise?
80?
80? Close, 70%. And probably after the Fort Worker strike, it's more like 80. All right, who wants to guess what the approval rate is for Congress? This year?
10%.
It's 20%, and that's because the American working class is generous and gives people too many chances. The labor movement is inspiring. It's inspired people. And so people are watching strikes. I've gotten so much support from my community for being a unionist and for fighting. So, and youth are more international. They're looking at how we can have a voice that cares about people all over the world, not just, the nationalist program of both parties. So there's a lot of potential. And, billionaires have two parties. It's what Nancy said. Like, billionaires have two parties, workers need one. That's our pitch. And it's landing right now.
Thank you all. I know that we have an interactive crowd. Can I ask if maybe you hold up applause? And we'll do a really big one at the end. And also speakers, if there is whatever, we're having a little harder time picking up when there's other sounds going on. So, okay, next up. So, how can the Labor Party organize beyond the elections? I was recently, a couple months ago, at the Ask Me National Convention, and Tim Waltz showed up, and it's like, the unions pay all this money for all the, t-shirts and swag for that. And what was interesting was it's a little hard when your union has told you you have to do this, right? You have to go out and vote and all the things that you were saying. But what was interesting is a lot of people were not that super enthusiastic, and I was surprised, pleasantly, needless to say. So, but we also know too, as you all have said, we need to go beyond election, because if we focus on just the election, then this becomes once every 4 years, maybe once every 2 years, depending on governorships and stuff. So how can the Labor Party help organize beyond the elections? Let's start off with Sultana.
So a Labor Party can help us. Sorry.
Say it again.
So a Labor Party, as Hutch and Elias, and I've mentioned already, can help us organize around so many different issues and movements. Just like in our unions, we're not just organizing for, material changes to our working conditions, better pay, better, safer working conditions, etc., benefits, all that. But seeing our unions as a vehicle for social justice in our communities as well. The things that actually affect workers on a day-to-day basis are not just in the workplace. It's everything, really. All the systems that affect us on a daily basis in our lived existences are all these different issues. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about like reproductive justice now. So the same political parties that attack our unions are also attacking our reproductive rights. And I see a Labor Party as being a way to fight for us, right? Like in the mobilization for reproductive justice, for example, a lot of the work we do is trying to get the AFL-CIO to convene a actual convention where we're able to talk about the ways in which together we can fight for reproductive justice. in our unions. And I think that while so much of the work that's happening in the labor movement is making our unions actually democratic and responsive to the rank and file and, representing the workers that are in these unions, a labor party can go beyond that. And also sorry, just checking my notes really quick. So labor also plays a really critical role in the struggle for Palestinian liberation. And it's, as workers, we have a distinct power to actually shut down production and do what it takes to make those in power, the ruling class, actually listen to us. And that is where we have, that's where we have our power. And the Labor Party is a vehicle for us to be able to organize to wield that power.
Yeah.
All right, Elias.
Yeah, I mean, I think those two examples are so clear because I think one of the things we talk about is every issue is a working class issue, like abortion, reproductive justice, war, it all affects the working class, It's an old, lesson of Vietnam, like the rich people in power their children didn't die in Vietnam. Like wars always affect the working class people of both countries. These laws are all affect the working class in different ways. And so the Labor Party, in order to really pull in support and do what it needs to do, has to be active in all these struggles. And just to speak on Palestine, which is, something we all feel really strongly about, is like trying to stop this grinding war machine that our tax dollars are funding. And, the longshoremen on the East Coast, unfortunately, it's very conservative leadership, very patriotic, very like go America, nationalistic. They put out a statement right before the strike that they would continue to help with arms shipments, with military shipments. They weren't going to stop receiving and sending anything to do with the U.S. military. With a movement from the bottom, with pressure from other unions, you could imagine if they did the opposite. They said, we're going to strike just to stop sending bombs that are killing people in Gaza, just to stop arms and aid going to Israel, because it's not in the interest of the working class there or here to do so. It's in the interest of the arm manufacturers who donate to both parties, right? So I think that's just one way that a Labor Party could really do, like Sultan said, like you said, use the muscle we have as workers to affect change. I think also like there's a lot of people in this room that probably aren't in unions, right? Like I wasn't until I organized one. We need to have a massive unionization drive in every job, and a Labor Party could lead that massive unionization drive to give people in unions to build the power, and that would just be huge, right? So those are some of the examples I think of.
Yeah, thanks. I want to focus on the question of environmental destruction and climate change, the framework of this question. We're about 14 years away since the BP oil spill in the Gulf, which was a really horrific, situation. And every year, environmental destruction and climate change just keeps getting worse and worse. And we're seeing the, serious effects of that right now, in the South. And if you've seen the footage from, Asheville, North Carolina, or from down in Florida, it's truly horrific. And when you think about, what a Labor Party would mean, we think about the ability to mobilize the entire class and to coordinate things through the entire class, and not just, this union, local, in this particular place, but a party could unify the actions of the entire class. And what would it mean if, one of your candidates or one of your elected labor officials got up and said, look, this deal that let's use Joe Biden as an example because he's the current president. This deal that Joe Biden's making and he's pitching as, good for climate change, is actually really a sellout. And it's actually gonna increase drilling in a lot of areas, and it's gonna, ruin, it's actually gonna lead to a greater destruction of the environment. That's one thing that a Labor Party could do. They could expose the secrets and backdoor deals and actually explain to the public what the legislation actually means, because most people don't have the time to read through and go through each piece of legislation, and that's all done very intentionally so that we don't understand what's going on. But a candidate or someone elected in office through the Labor Party could expose that, and they could build a movement and call on people to demand things like going back to the BP oil spill. The workers knew that rig was unsafe. They knew that a disaster could happen at any moment. And they didn't have any control over safety on the job. Now, what if we let a national struggle for workers' control over safety in their workplaces, where workers can decide when to shut down production and when to start it based on if it's safe for themselves or safe, for the environment. And greater than that, we would be able to begin the discussion of what, I guess with the popular term for it would be a just transition, right? Converting the polluting industries to green and sustainable, a green and sustainable economy. And that seems like an impossible task. But when you think about it, we've had kind of these transitions that have happened before, like during World War II, when so many workers were mobilized into the war effort. When they came back, and there was so many people coming back from war efforts, they didn't have jobs. They didn't have any opportunities when they first came back, and the government they enforced the GI Bill. They allowed them some stipends so they didn't have to work every day. They could go back to school, and they actually organized to be able to give some relief to GIs who were coming back who might not have the ability to work right away. Because that's a big shift from going from a war economy to a peace economy. So they've done it. They just done it in their own interest for the most part. Or when they went to war in the first place, they took over the auto industry and they transitioned it to making war goods. So why can't they do that to create a green, peaceful economy? Why can't we transition to something that's beneficial for humanity and that can actually be sustainable and make our lives better, where we're creating jobs that are making light rail, that are making the solar panels and wind turbines in mass that we need, so that we can actually, begin to save the environment, hold off the worst, most devastating effects of climate change, because it's here, it's coming, it's not going away anytime soon. And, we need to build that movement to stop that. And the Labor Party is part of that. And if we're not, fighting for that class independence and fighting for this alternative project that is going to put working people in charge, that is going to give working people the leadership, we make the country run. We should be able to run the country. We should run the country. And if we're not engaged in that project and building it, we're abstaining and we're letting the capitalists run roughshod, not just over the economy, but over the entire globe. Through wars, through all the other ways that they're destroying our planet. So I think that's my time. I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Thanks. I got it.
Our speakers are doing great, keeping to their time, so appreciate it. All right, so next question. As we know, the far right is growing internationally as well as domestically. And how can a Labor Party be effective to counter the right, both again globally and here in the United States? So, Elias.
Well, I think it's so important that we get union power on the streets to fight with the far right. I think I spoke earlier, and we're speaking to how it's not just about the far right growing, it's about their quote unquote opposition letting them do so. And every time you see a fascist regime come to power, there's their opposition in government that lets it happen. And so that's happening with the Democrats. And so we've got to have that counter. And I think unions and Labor Party could bring together everyone who's in the sight lines of, the far right. Unions are in the sight lines of the far right. They don't talk about it a lot. Certainly, socialists are. Immigrants, trans people, the disabled. These are all workers. These are all part of the working class, and we all need to be in a united front against the far right. In the streets, counter demonstrating when they show their, ugly faces. That includes, so many other organizations like our people of color, Black organizations, Jewish organizations. Like I said, everyone who is really threatened by this and scapegoated, right? And unions and Labor Party could bring all them together with an analysis of like, this is what's important is having a counter program, like, no, again, like why you're experiencing your pain. It is not your neighbor who's a different color than you. It is not immigrants. It is not foreign countries. It is like this corporate system, which is just sucking the life force out of your labor, out of our environment. And they love that you're attacking each other rather than focused on them and what they're, taking home to the bank. So I think the Labor Party has a huge potential to have a clear counter program and win people to those ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, so does anybody in here like work in industry or one? I know you. So for those who don't, because it looks like most people in here don't, it's a really conservative atmosphere. I work in the war industries. Our union, we're fortunate we have a pride caucus, which myself and my comrade over there participate in. But overwhelmingly, the vast majority of people in the shop are conservative to far right. A lot of QAnon conspiracy stuff going around on the bathroom stalls. There's graffiti from one of the concentration camps, Auschwitz, on there. It's bad. There's a lot of bad stuff. But I want to tell you, it was not always like this. A lot of the people who claim Trump or even more far right ideas, at one point, not long ago, in the last elections with Obama, voted for Obama twice. Most of these people, I'm telling you, this is real. They supported Bernie Sanders. And then they felt betrayed by the Democratic Party and they felt let down and they saw Trump as an alternative. And so what this shows is that the working class is flexible. Their ideas are not in stone. They are not concrete. They can be changed and molded and discussed, and people are won over in the struggle of ideas. And that's what's not happening in our shop in a mass way. It's just there's a couple like really, class conscious people in there. If we had a dozen, I would say even if we had 5 people in the shop going around talking politics with people on a daily basis, we would win that battle of ideas. We would change those minds. We've done solidarity photos for people, for struggles for the UAW strike, for the Ukraine, people want to express solidarity. They want to make that connection. They want an alternative. And in the absence of a strong left or socialist or revolutionary voice, in the absence of that, there's a vacuum and the right comes in. And those ideas fester, especially since the pandemic, when a lot of these conspiracy theories were allowed to flourish. And I'll tell you, the union leaderships don't help because they abstain from that struggle. They do not engage. They would rather, and it's not even a majority necessarily in the shop that are like these really far right ideas, but they pander to it and they work, they'll actively tell people how to get away with not getting a COVID vaccine or not wearing masks, how to file for religious exemptions. And so they are conceding to the worst elements that are in the shop and allowing it to grow and spread. And when someone gets up and says, yeah, we heard that vaccines have fetuses in them and all this sort of stuff, they don't say, no, that's not true, that's a myth. Or they don't bring in union nurses to come and give a presentation to tell them what they're going through in the hospitals. That COVID pandemic is real and is very intense. They abstain from it and they allow the far right to fester. And what a Labor Party could do, what militants in the shop can do, what organized people who are class conscious can do in the shop is change that reverse course and get them to begin fighting for things that are that we consider progressive, for things that we consider that we need. Because ultimately, when you talk to them and you tell them, no, Trump's just a grifter, he's just a lying politician like Harris, like everybody else. Their narrative breaks down. They can't carry it forward because it's not rooted in something that's material, that's real. It's rooted in something that's like a hope and ideal that they think is right. And if you actually confront them with what are the material needs that we need to fight for, that we want, that we aspire to, and how do we get there? You can change those minds, but it takes everybody going back into their communities, into their shops to have that discussion.
Yeah.
Figure out how that kind of.
So it's interesting that Hutch, you talked about your experience like in your own shop, like doing like that kind of political education. And I think that there's this idea that, you know, working people aren't, you know, don't know enough or won't be able to like do the work of liberating ourselves, which is completely wrong. You know, if you take the time to have those conversations and really meet people where they're at, and like meeting people where they're at means like understanding like the ideas that they have are based on misinformation, based on lack of transparency, and like based on like, you know, the ruling class of corporations, they benefit from the fact that like we are, you know, we tend to be misinformed or like not aware of how we're exploited and oppressed on a daily basis, and that we don't have conversations about it, and that we just accept our lives as they are. So I think that really like education and like really raising that kind of consciousness needs to be the basis of which we build this Labor Party. It's core to all of it, and really that's the core to all organizing in general. I think that so the main line of like the Harris-Waltz like party is that like vote for them or like face fascism, right? When in fact, like I said before, the two parties are two sides of the same coin, and the Democrats have enabled the rise of fascism in this country by defending capitalism and ignoring working class people's pain, and you know, undercutting unions and the mass movements necessary to counter the reactionaries and the growing fascism in this country. And so that's why I think like raising consciousness is 100% key to all of the work that we need to be doing to really develop this like political voice that we need. We just have to organize ourselves outside of this existing system. And I think that's something that we have to really educate each other on, is that like, you know, reforming the system as it is not going to work. We have to organize ourselves outside of the existing structures, the two-party system, and like build a real alternative that fights for us and represents us.
Right?
Yeah.
We can go back again.
Sorry, I spaced out there. All right, last question. What can we do to help make a Labor Party be independent of the Democrats and Republicans? I mean, all of you kind of touched a little bit upon this, right? But what we see is, you know, there's minor parties, third parties that end up feeling like they have to work with, you know, sell out their principles in order to get something a little bit, right? And we're not envisioning that, you know, that's hardly inspiring because we're already seeing how it's not working. So talk a little bit more in terms of your insights of how do we make sure that we are not caving into, you know, or be more pessimistic about our ability to stand up to the twin parties of capitalism. So why don't we have Hutch?
Sure. Yeah, great question to kind of wrap up this part of the discussion. I think, when we talk about, so actually, how many people in here are actually in unions? Okay, so good, or retired, or, good portion, all right. So I think one of the first things that needs to happen, because we have to, I think, think about how do we get to the point from not having a Labor Party to actually having a Labor Party, and then leading the struggle inside of it for, in independent, more, so I would say socialist and revolutionary direction if possible. Because even honestly, even a reformist Labor Party would be advanced for the working class here that broke from the Democratic Party. And it would be a place where we could fight to push that program to take up a more revolutionary viewpoint. But one of the things I think we first have to do is, and I think mostly at the start at least, it needs to be rooted in the existing labor movement. And I think through that process, even 14 million workers that are organized could radically transform the landscape. And we don't have 14 million workers ready to form a Labor Party right now. And it has to happen at the level of the rank and file. And to do that, union members need to go back into their unions, into their workplaces, and begin discussing this with their coworkers, and then forming like Labor Party clubs to actually educate and build around the question of the Labor Party. Because in the Teamsters, they recently did these like town hall meetings, and I know in my local there was like, the president got up and said, yes, we support the Labor Party, but now is not the time to do it. And it's generally, I think, because there's a lack of faith in the working class, to actually drive this forward. And it's also fear because of the connection that the labor bureaucracy has with the Democratic Party, how tightly woven they are into the fabric of capitalist society, not just through the political arm, but also through like the CIA and so on. I mean, if you read Jeff Shirky's new book, Blue Collar Empire, you'll see the many strands that connect the labor movement to the imperialist project. And it's important that we understand this as we're going into this. And that's why the only way forward through this is not to become a labor bureaucrat, not to get into the leadership. Leadership comes at all levels. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't get into leadership. We have clearly a fantastic union leader here, but the ranks are the only ones that can drive this forward, that can actually sustain the push to build a Labor Party. And so that's why it's essential to go in and start this education and organize Labor Party clubs where those discussions can be had, because you're also not going to get the most radical anti-capitalist platform just right off the bat. It's going to be a struggle to win people to those ideas, to say, yes, we need to, not everyone's going, walking around thinking we need to put all of the major corporations under public ownership, put them under democratic workers' control. That takes a struggle of discussions in the shop. And that's what we want, right? We want to put, if we're going to actually stop climate change, if we're actually going to stop wars abroad, and we're actually going to be able to create a jobs program that puts everybody back to work with like good paying union jobs, it's going to take putting the entirety of society under, the major corporations and banks and railroads and all that under, public ownership or nationalization and democratic workers' control. And that discussion needs to start like now in very formative ways, through these type of like Labor Party clubs. And I would be very interested to see if anybody takes up this challenge to go back and form one in their unions, because that's not easy in and of itself. And you need to go to the ranks in order to make it happen. You cannot just put forward a resolution. I mean, you could in the leadership, and they might support it. Yes, we support our union supports a Labor Party. That's all great. But if you don't have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 10,000 workers that are co-signing that, and behind it, it has no teeth and it has no ability to really get off the ground. If you're going to pass anything in your union's leadership, you have to get it passed through the rank and file first, and they have to bring it with you to support it and back it. Otherwise, you have no strength going into that struggle and no grounds which to stand on. In the 96 effort, that's kind of how they started to do it. They went and they surveyed all of the workers in a bunch of different unions, and they saw that people were interested in building a labor party, and that gave them the political capital then to go forward and start actually organizing it. Tony Mazzocchi, those people, while I have political differences with the way they did it and some of the aspects of it, it was a good example of how you actually start that process. And I would encourage anybody to go back and look at the videos on YouTube where Mazzocchi's going around talking about trying to convince people that they should build in union halls around the country to build a labor party. It's a really important discussion that's been lost to us. And it's the fundamental and foundational part that we need to actually be engaged in those discussions on the shop floor, one-on-one with the ranks.
All right, thank you. Sultana, go ahead.
So, just to, I guess, add on to what Hutch is saying, because absolutely, I think that the work that we need to be doing is within our unions. And if you're not unionized, to unionize your workplace, talk to your coworkers and support unionized workers. And, organizing your workplace is really about just, building solidarity with your coworkers that and empowering each other that together you actually do have power to materially change your life and your working conditions. And I think that within our unions, we just have to keep pushing to democratize them, to, build the rank and file movements within, our unions that actually represent rank and file workers. And I can talk a little bit about the work that we're doing in ALU right now. So my union, we just affiliated with the Teamsters a few months ago. And the Teamsters, IBT, it's known for being one of the more top-down, not very democratic unions in this country. And I think the work that we're trying to do in ALU right now is really, we just wrote our bylaws. We just got them approved by the membership. And it was important to us to really institutionalize provisions that make the membership, the rank and file, the highest decision-making power of our union. It's not me. I'm a leader now of the union, but I should not have the power to make changes. The members should. And really institutionalizing things like that so that the base of power should be the membership, and how do we push changes in our unions that make that happen, and that's how we build our power. And then if you're not unionized, unionize your workplace. That's what I think we need to do, and that's how we get organized.
Thank you. Okay, Elias.
Yeah, just to build on what you all said, I want to talk about, I think there is a real unprecedented movement within unions to push out corrupt leadership, to have democracy. There's these democratic caucuses, reform caucuses. And a big development has been, people in unions pushing their unions to act on Palestine, whether it's divesting their pensions from, war profiteers, put out statements for arms embargoes. So that's a huge kind of groundswell happening within the labor movement that is challenging the old order. And that's the potential. I think that's a huge part of why a Labor Party could have real gas, but we have to be real, as Hutch said, about how ossified this connection is, this old boys network with the Democrats that the Labor has. It's going to be a break. It's going to be like a seismic, struggle. And I think work within the unions, YouTube spoke about that, but I want to talk about a little bit about the left and how important the left is. And I want to start with a shout out to Workers' Voice, who, is working with us through this event with Freedom Socialist Party, two left organizations working together. Can you believe it? Let's give a round of applause. Thank you. And it needs to be done, because if the left doesn't unite behind a Labor Party effort, we have a very important role. Like Workers' Voice, we're Freedom Socialist Party, we're a revolutionary socialist organization. We have a vision of full democratic control of the economy, but a Labor Party, for all the reasons we've talked about, is an essential project that we need to build together. And we have to talk about real practical programmatic questions, and we have to be in agreement on those as a left. AKA, what's the platform going to be? What are the demands going to be? What's the end capitalist platform? What's the democratic structure? Talking about democracy. Is this Labor Party going to be run by bureaucrats at the top, or will it be rank and file driven? That's very important to have demands for a structure that works. How to run candidates. A lot of questions we get on the street. We've been canvassing about this event and this idea for months. Is how do you prevent horrible politicians from coming in and running and just wanting to get power? So we have to figure out how we want to run candidates and hold them accountable to the platform, which is something the Democrats and the Republicans do not do. So we need to have those levers when we build it. But I think, like I said, we've been talking about there's real potential in the labor movement and without. And I think we have to make sure people who aren't in unions see this party is for them too, it has to speak to them. So those are some ideas.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much for kicking off what is going to be, I'm sure, in a very interesting, exciting, insightful discussion.